Water management at a concrete plant for today and tomorrow. We have the ability to easily and efficiently recycle or repurpose all of the wastewater material at a concrete plant. Hello, I'm Les Connard, the owner of the Washout Watchdog. For all the people here at the NRMCA, you know me as the guy with the plastic bucket that hangs on the end of the chute and that rinses down at the job site and captures all the material in water, transfers it into a tank by gravity, and brings it back to the plant. And on the right here, we have EnviroGuard, which is the other option to wash into a bucket and transfer the water into the drum. So I have clients that want to do both, and I've joined together with EnviroGuard so that we can offer both solutions and we can put the systems together in any fashion you'd like. So if you're a Washout Watchdog client, or you're an EnviroGuard client, or you like either one of those, please stop by our booth and we'd be happy to talk about those things. So here's the problem that I wanted to give you today, that the regulations on how we capture, contain, secure, treat, and repurpose our concrete washout water and materials is changing. It's becoming more regulated, stringent, higher costs and penalties, and our options are becoming more and more limited. Well, solutions for concrete returning to the plant. This is nothing new. This is what we normally do in the industry. So when the concrete comes back to the plant, if it's still usable, we'll either make a new product or possibly we could load on it. We could reuse it. A reclaimer. You could put it through a reclaimer and you could get the rock and sand back from that concrete, and then the water is separated and put into our first pit. A pit system is traditionally how we all manage our concrete materials that are too wet to do the first two things, and that it puts the rock and sand and water into a first pit, and then it weirs through a second pit. So it goes through our pit system, and once it gets to the third and it's pretty clarified, we can usually use that water to wash out concrete trucks, or sometimes we use it back into the loads where it's appropriate. And then if we come back with hard concrete, we don't have anything to make with it. Sometimes we'll windrow it or put it into a container that can be taken off site to be crushed and reused somewhere else. This is Applied Technology Systems. Howard Oman owns the company, and I capture and contain and bring water back to the yard. And one of the problems is by capturing and bringing back from the job site, I create a bigger problem back at the yard by bringing back more material and water, which we have enough of. And so 4 years ago, I joined with Howard, and I was asking him if he knew how to treat the water that I brought back. And we have been working together for 4 years on solutions of how to use CO2 to treat the water and neutralize it, along with products that I make that capture and contain. And so a CO2 system is something that many of you are familiar with. There's a high pH and a low pH. Acids are low pH, and the concrete washout water is a very high pH. And so if we add some sort of acid, and CO2 is a gas, which is an acid, and then you have liquid acids. The problem, in my opinion, of a liquid acid is that it's hard to get a good mix in there. There's this buffering that happens, and it seems like we either have too much or too little. And there's some danger for the employee being exposed to a liquid acid. So the CO2, in my opinion, is much safer, easier to use, and it's certainly much cheaper. So CO2, you can do about 60,000 gallons for about $20 worth of CO2. And that takes it from a 7.5 down to neutral at a 7. Well, Howard and I, again, have been working for 4 years on this problem. And one of the problems that we've been working on, we have another person that we work very closely together. And the three of us are really trying to solve the problem of managing the concrete material and water at a concrete plant. And this other individual, Mark, from Slurry Solutions, thought that an above-ground bunker would be a better way than putting it into a pit. So if you don't put it in a pit, you don't have to dig it out. And with that concept, we worked for a couple of years and finally came up with what we call an above-ground pit, or the Alpha Dog. And this is a plastic container made out of industrial strength plastic, and this type of plastic is called cross-linked. So it's kind of like a fiber mesh plastic that when you bake it, it actually weaves itself together. It's very, very strong and can handle like negative 40-degree temperature and not crack or break. And it's made to expand and contract and not crack like a Home Depot bucket or something like that. So this is going to last a very, very long time. What we do is we have the concrete truck wash out their trucks at the end of the day into this pit. The rock and sand stays in the pit, and the water rolls over, the water and cement and fines rolls over the top into pit 1. So now you're not going to have to muck out pit 1 near as much. You're not going to have to drive your tractor in. You can take this safely across the yard without making a mess. And when you dump it over, you're going to find that it's much, much drier material than you would pull out of pit 1, because most of the cement and the fines have been washed out of it and have flowed over and out, so we can treat those separately. In the next slide, you can see as we dump it over, it's much drier material than what you would normally bring out of a mucked out plant, and that makes it easier to either put in a roll-off or dry out a little bit more on the side, but it won't take near as much time as that. Somebody else that we've just started to work with, and it's pretty exciting because, okay, so we've got an above ground pit, you don't have to go inside, but now we have more cement water to deal with. And Howard and Mark and I were working with a cone tank, and we could get the cement out of the water, but we just couldn't dry it very effectively. And our friends here, I've got Della in the back, and she'll be in the booth as well, is here today to present their ideas about how to take and get the cement out of the water. And this is a great picture of it right here. This is a plant in Southern California. It's a precast plant, but it's the same concept. We have a pit full of water here on the right, as you can see. And then we have a filter press. And many of you are already familiar with a filter press. But what's so amazing about it to me is that you can dry up the cement instantly and be able to do something with these cakes rather than have all this cement water that there's really nothing to do easily with. And my solution of a cone tank didn't produce anything that was easily hauled off. And that's what we're looking for, an ease of use and accessibility. So as you can see here, we've got very clear water in the tanks behind us. All of that water is coming from those gray pits. And so you can see in tandem, we have a filtration system that is going to take all of the solids out and produce clear water. The clear water is great, but it's still a high pH. And if we try to use that in our batching, we might get a negative reaction from that high pH coming into fresh concrete. So on the right, you see the cylinders for the CO2 and the CO2 machine. And if we treat that water, we can now use it for a number of things. We can rebatch with that water, if that's what you'd like to do with it. We can wash out our trucks with it over and over. We can actually wash out the outside of our trucks with no negative effect once you've neutralized the water. You can also use this water for your aggregates to keep the dust down or to keep them cool in the summer. And then you have dust control in the yard. As long as the water's not leaving the yard, you can use it to keep all the dust control down with that. And then if you're using a reclaimer that you keep the slurry water mixed up and you have to have a certain density to put it back into concrete, then you can use that water in there to adjust it. This is a BFK reclaimer. Many of you guys are familiar with a reclaimer. This is who we work with and who we recommend. We like the simplicity of the BFK reclaimer. It's also who Water Treatment Online is working with. So they worked with Howard on the CO2, they worked with me on my pits, they worked with BFK on a reclaimer. And if you have any of these things that you already have in place, you can take any of these pieces and add and subtract them to what you want to do. This is somebody else that I've just started working with this year, and it's Drum Blaster, and I like it a lot. And so there is a material inside the drum, hardened concrete, that I'd like to get out of that and again crush or reuse. And so this is right in the wheelhouse of what my passion is. reusing all the rock, sand, water, concrete that is brought back to a ready-mix plant. And so the drum blasters have their own booth here on site, and I would encourage you to take a look at them. This is very interesting. This is from Bauman Landscape, and they make a lot of things over in They're in San Francisco, and reusing the rock and sand is a very big part of what San Francisco is doing in the ready-mix industry. And we're looking for the rest of the country to catch on to recycled materials inside fresh concrete. But what they have here is they have volumetric trucks they bring out on the job site, and this is an on-site water treatment plant. So the low one is where they wash their trucks in, and the larger big dog pit, and I make both of these, takes the water out of the pit and puts it in the big dog, and then we treat it with CO2, and we take the clear water out of the pit, put it right back into the volumetric truck, and make fresh concrete right on site. So they're reusing all of their water to make concrete on site. Wanted to talk to you a little bit about permits and regulations. So all of you know that you have some permits that you can go apply for, and in some places it's very easy to get, some it's difficult, and then somewhere in between. So there is a process water discharge permit where after you treat the water by getting out all of the solids and by using both the CO2 and the filter press, you can neutralize the water, get out the solids, the cement, and even a number of the heavy metals will come right out with that. So then after you've done that and you have permission, you can discharge the water into the environment. A stormwater discharge permit would be after you've treated your stormwater appropriately. And again, both of those processes are very applicable to treating your stormwater. And then there's a sewer water discharge permit, meaning that that water will now go down in the sewer, not off the property, above ground, but below ground. And that water will be treated again by a sewer company. And all three of these are different examples of what you can do with the water once you've clarified it and brought the pH down with permission. And you'll have to look into that. And then there's exceptions to all of those to where you might not need any of them and be able to do what you'd like. But Doug, who's invited me here to speak today, is the expert on permits and water leaving the property and how to do that successfully. So I would refer all of your questions about that back to Doug. And again, thank you for your time. We'll be in our booth. I've got Della, Howard, and myself all here to serve you, and thank you for your time.